Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BoomBappED, capital E-D at the end. This is your host, Bushido Garvey, aka Government Brandon White. We also have Brother Atlas in the building.
Peace, y'all. What's going on?
Co-host extraordinaire and engineer extraordinaire. And we have Rob Lowe behind the camera. Peace, Rob Lowe. For those who don't know, BoomBappED is an honest, open, and clear-headed exploration of education and cultural issues focused on but not limited to the Rochester area through a hip-hop lens, right? And we have a very special guest in the building. Brother Atlas, would you care to do the honors of introducing our amazing guest?
Yeah, true indeed. So this brother here this week is by the name Rafael Outland, and of course, I first crossed paths with you through my work over at the Institute, the Gandhi Institute. I think that's where we first might have met up, but your history and your work in Rochester predates that day a couple years back. So for our listening audience who are just now getting acquainted with you, and we're going to be asking you specific questions later on, but give us kind of the executive summary of your background, and anything that sticks out as particularly important just to mention up front as an intro.
All right. So, first I want to just thank you, brothers, for having me. Thank you guys for putting this together.
It's only right.
This is definitely a tool, for change, and I want everybody who's listening to make sure they are aware of it. A little bit about my background. I grew up in College Park, Georgia.
Okay.
I was the youngest of 3 siblings, single parent household. I grew up on Gobby Road, Old National. Some might consider it the projects. It was definitely a struggling environment. I think throughout my upbringing I saw a lot of struggle. Drug dealing, prostitution, gun violence. And I think probably when I was about 11 was the first time I think I directly experienced a death from gun violence. I had a cousin who was 20 years old, who I really looked up to, I had a lot of respect for. And I think I probably was in maybe 4th, 5th grade. And him and 2 of his friends at the time were gunned down. Some say it might have been drug, gang related, but who knows, but 3 people were murdered. And I think at the time I was really impacted by it because number one, it was just traumatic. It was the first time I had ever lost anybody so close, so suddenly. But then I think secondly, it was somebody who I really looked up to, and growing up without a father, I didn't have a lot of direct role models as males. And so, that was a major loss. And I think, throughout my life as a young teenager, I managed to stay out of the streets due to my interest and love for sports. I played basketball and I was a pretty good athlete, and it kind of kept me away from a lot of the struggle that existed in my community. And so I give thanks just for that sport. And even the coaches, they were male mentors in my life at the time.
Which sport was this again?
Basketball.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went on, eventually went to college. I went to Clark Atlanta University, historically black college university. And I think it was there where I really experienced what I like to always say, the power of black power. And black power, in a sense, I was coming from an environment where, there were a lot of positive things happening, positive adults. But I think black power, in a sense, where there were a lot of black people in one space really striving for progression. And they were trying to do something better with their lives based on their plight, where they came from. So I think throughout our interaction with my peers, my black professors who were also there, I think I left that university not only with a better understanding of who I was as a black male, but I also realized, based on some of those early experiences of violence, I really wanted to attempt to, in some way or another, address that issue. Of violence. And I didn't know how at the time, but I knew it was something I wanted to address. And so I went to school in Boston, learned a lot in Beantown, met a lot of great people. And then eventually I stayed in Berlin, Germany. And when I was there for a year. That's where I met my, or not met, but I really had a chance to get to know my present wife, Vivka. And so being there, I learned a lot about myself outside of American culture. And that was the first time, I would say, I had an opportunity to look at America as an outsider.
What brought you to Berlin?
Well, at the time, I had finished up at Boston University, and so I trained as a school counselor.
Okay.
And so I started out as a school counselor, but I always knew eventually I wanted to go and do my doctorate work.
Yeah.
And so a year and a half, 2 years of school counseling, I decided to, just kind of do something more meaningful with my life.
Right.
I had never lived outside of the U.S. The only place outside of Atlanta, College Park I had lived was Boston.
Okay.
So I just wanted to see a little something and experience something different than what I, had initially experienced. And so following that experience, that's what kind of brought me to Rochester. And I've been here since 2009. University of Rochester, I want to give a shout out, just for their support and allowing me to remain critical, as people like my hero Mumia Abu-Jamal constantly remind me. But even the professors who were there at the Warner School, allowing me to stay critical about some of the issues that, I saw myself destined to try to address. So,
peace to Dr. Nelms, by the way, who's over there.
Bless up,
also,
yeah. Brother
is
Sean.
running East High School.
So, that's sort of, I guess, the backdrop. And, I'm currently a professor at the college at Brockport. Still connected to organizations, as you mentioned, Aaron like Gandhi. Teen Empowerment, want to give a shout out to Doug, Sean, Shalinda, the whole family on that end.
What up?
Yep. And again, man, constantly keeping my eye on the struggle and trying to stay connected to the people.
When did you end up getting your undergrad and your postgrad degrees in?
So I earned my undergrad degree in psychology.
All right.
And I think coming in, I grew up with some different issues. I think some of them might have been anger, not having a father figure and, wanting to better understand, what were some things that triggered me, and certain behaviors I might have saw at the time. So I studied psychology undergrad, and I did a year of research, at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. And it was then where I kind of had an opportunity to just sit with people and listen to their stories and their experiences about past trauma. And so I think it was from that experience that sort of influenced me to want to go and explore aspects of counseling and counselor education.
That's right.
So.
Well, we're glad that journey has led you here, brother man.
Hey man, I'm glad to be here, man.
Indeed.
So, what we like to do when we have a guest in studio is get a feel for the hip hop card, if you will.
Okay.
Hip hop orientation.
Yeah, man, I love hip hop.
We got a couple of stock questions. We're gonna do a slight tweak on last week's, which was if you could be a rapper for a day, who would it be? But I'm gonna ask you this.
Okay.
The situation is Bronx. It's 1977. All right.
77. Oh man.
So
Yes, sir.
at that time, would you have been? Now you got your choice here: as MC, graffiti artist, DJ, or breakdancer. Which of those pillars would you orient to at the if you had the choice of represent one of them as the culture's starting to break out?
I don't know. I think just from my idea of, a tradition, I try to embrace Rastafari. There's this idea of sound, word, power, and through that lens, the words, our expressions always influence people. We never know if it's negatively or positive, but there's always an influence. And so, I don't know, man. I think I would probably vouch to be the MC.
I knew it.
I think I would vouch to be the
I knew
MC,
it.
man.
I had you a little bit for the DJ, you know what I mean? It's a
Okay.
cool herc and all that, you know what I
I
mean?
could dig it. Yeah, that's I
Dr. O on
I
the
like
MIC.
making some sounds, but
Word.
when it comes to just using my voice and the creativity of voice. I think even as a hip hop junkie, man, I'm heavily influenced by lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I love beats, and you know, I love some of the old, you know, hip hop lyrics that kind of, you know,
True.
gave us sort of the lessons.
Yes.
But now when I think about some of the creativity, man, I think some of the first two artists I really think about are Stickman and M1.
Dead
from
Prez all day,
Prez,
baby.
man. I mean, these brothers have kept their sound, their perspective so grounded with the people, and I think even the younger generation now, because they have never been sort of this always mainstream group, may not understand and have heard even those lessons.
That's right.
So just for the younger generation who might be listening, Dead Prez, M1, Stickman, you know, politics is hip hop, and yeah, man.
Right, it's bigger than hip hop.
One
Right?
love.
It's bigger than when we're doing the sound check. Wasn't I actually saying lyrics from it's
You're
bigger than
running
hip
them
hop?
down.
It's like 1 2 1 2. It's bigger than hip hop. You a rider, da 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 da. I don't know all the lyrics off the top of my head, but
It's heavy though, man.
yep, absolutely classic material. And you're right about Dead Prez. They've
Right
done
on.
such a good job staying grounded and consistent.
Consistent,
And
man.
actually, that's something that we want to dwell with you a
Okay.
bit about. You know, you noted your work with Gandhi,
Yeah,
which is kind of grounded with working with youth, younger folk. You know what I'm saying? People pre-college age, right?
Right on.
But then you're also a professor
Right.
at SUNY Brockport. How does being a change agent in secondary education differ from being a change agent in higher education for you?
that's a good question. So when I think about my work with the young people, number one, I always think about who was I when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And some of the first things that come up, very intelligent, very committed, hardworking. But then I think of some of the other things that gave adults problems. Sometimes could be quick-tempered, sometimes can be rebellious, you know, and was always sort of wanting to be heard. And so I think being a change agent with young people, I start with the idea of trying to use their voices, trying to listen to what they have to say, trying to use what they are saying because they are so intelligent, to influence others to create change. And so, yeah, it all starts, I guess, as one of my heroes, Walter Rodney, would say, trying to ground myself with them and not trying to see myself as this authoritative adult figure who's looking over them, you know, and working on them, but rather working with them. So I think that's sort of the approach. And when I compare that to being a change agent with, and I work with graduate students, so, you know, we have probably age range from early mid-20s all the way up sometimes to maybe like early 50s, you know,
Right,
some
right,
non-traditional
yeah,
traditional
yep.
folk. But when I think about being a change agent with them, I think the difference happens is that they have more experience in life than our young people might have, and so they're coming with the sort of wealth of wisdom where it makes my work easier rather than me having to teach them something. I more or less, and I consider it a constructivist approach, I try to use what they're saying and the knowledge and wisdom they already have to create whatever style of learning or whatever approach to counseling or working with people they choose fit. So I don't know, in a nutshell, when I think about both perspectives, man, it's really about grounding myself with the people, you know, whether they're youth, whether they're grad students, but then not allowing how I see the world to overshadow the knowledge and wisdom that they're bringing to the perspective. And I think this is something, even when I think about Frere, Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed,
Yes.
he tries to help us stay away from the ideas of superimposing, you know, our quote-unquote supposed knowledge as educators, but beginning to foster and cultivate the knowledge that our students come to the table with. So I know it's a very people-focused, I should put it, approach. And, you know, wherever the students, young people want to take the change, you know, that's where I'm willing to follow.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm finding appreciation in this element of educating versus programming.
Correct,
Right?
correct.
You are,
Right, educating versus programming.
that's right,
Yep.
you are making sure that whether they are a 13-year-old or a 48-year-old, that you are using their experiences as opposed to superimposing your own
Correct.
to, as you said, go over them, right? But instead looking out for them and making sure that they go down their path the way that they need to go down their path in terms of intellectual development and whatever's in their best interest, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I can appreciate that for sure.
And I would even take it another step even lower. And, you know, I think as we had this talk, you might be familiar with this work, but I once had an experience in the elementary space, middle school space.
Yeah.
You know, and I was in there helping them begin to understand, you know, aspects of social justice and organizing and creating change in the space where they were being educated. And so again, I was attempting to use the middle schoolers' voices and saying, no, these are some things that we won't change. These are some issues that we find important. And I was trying to organize that as a movement within the school. And I think, although I might have been, you know, shut down by the powers that be, I think that is the kind of organizing the change we got to start thinking about as the adults.
Yeah.
You know, because we got a certain power in these spaces. And when we say, well, these are the messages the young people keep telling us we got to do, then we use that as our excuse. You know, this is what they're saying, we got to move on, so
Yep.
we got to follow it.
That's right.
So, tell us a little bit, going back to the college level now.
Okay.
What are some of the dynamics that you run into, that you experience being a young black professor out at Brockport? You know, is there anything that's particular to that experience that you think separates you from your colleagues who don't fit that demo?
Yeah. I think the first thing I want to be clear about is, again, my tradition and what I love about being black. You know, when I show up, you know, I have a very thick beard, thick dreadlocks, beignet lock, and I to embrace my natural essence, you know, just who I am as a natural being. And I think sometimes, just from initial observation, that can be confusing for some people. You know, so for example, I might walk on campus and, you know, it just might be looks of like, man, who is this dude? Or, you know, where is he going? And I think for me now, you know, and this is something I always remind blacks, you know, when you grow your locks, you know, make sure you pay attention to the experience, because just thinking about that role now from a professor seat,
Right.
I can wear what I'm wearing right now, you know, say to a faculty meeting or just on campus. And I think many students may not automatically assume that I'm a professor. But then, you know, the clothing might change. I put on a blazer and some dress shoes, and now I'm a professor. You know, I'm even greeted and treated as a professor. And so I think what I'm speaking about too is, I don't think blackness should be this thing that's black or white. You know, it's like clear cut, like I gotta dress or act and be this way to be black. But I think blackness is just simply paying attention to all those different messages. You know, we change costumes, who are we to everybody now? Versus if we wearing another one.
Right.
And so
To everybody.
To everybody on the
including
campus.
other people of color, other black folks.
Man, to other black people as well. So I think, to me, man, being a black professor means, number one, as Mumia tried to constantly drill in, you know, maintaining my critical perspective. I think two things stand out to me when I say that. My approach to teaching, and then also the kind of research, scholarship I'm interested in. So when I think about my approach to teaching, I'm trying to help my students understand how to think. You understand? And what
How to think.
How to think.
Not what?
Not
How.
what
Indeed.
to think, how
That's
to
crazy,
think.
yeah.
And what that entails from somebody even like Flower is that we have to now begin to dissect some of these major concepts. You know, so we might throw racism out on a college campus. And so we really begin to dissect, what is racism on campus? What does it look like? Who says that white students should practice it? Who says that black students should acquiesce to it? You know, so we're really trying to get all these different perspectives about this one concept. So by the end of it, I think we all now have an understanding on what to move on. And it's more clear and it's more to the point. So that's the educational part, just really, and that's just one aspect, helping students understand how to think. The second part is with my scholarship. When I say critical perspective, every topic that I am trying to investigate must be from a social justice lens. If I want to commit my energy, my time to it, it must be from a point of people struggling and being impacted by this thing. So my research for my dissertation as a doctoral student was on the meaning and experiences of violence among urban African-American adolescent males. So with this population, we always hear, oh, violence, this and that, and you know, all these different stats about violence. But it's rare that we sit down with those who have been going through the violence to actually talk to them and say, what's happening? What is all this violence about? How do you see it? What does it mean to your life? What does it mean to be in a gang? Who are the gang members that you're growing up with? And I think through this research, I began to see that number one, violence was much more than these isolated experiences, but they were cumulative over time. And many of the primary ones were the institutionalized violence, police occupying, you know, harassing them in their own community. The school to prison jail pipeline, you know, them going to school feeling like criminals. You know, in the place where I'm supposed to be learning, I'm feeling like a criminal in this place. What the meaning of being in a gang.
Yeah.
To some of these brothers, it was about family.
Cohesion.
You know, protection. I got your back, you got mine. You feed me, I feed you. We survive, we struggle together.
That's right.
And again, some of the practices to attain those things at times might be self-destructive. But I think at the end, it's more about a real unity and a meaning that supersedes anything that anybody outside of these young men can talk about. So
that's what is so crazy, because so many of these books here have been referenced. But in this book here, the FBI war on Tupac and black leaders, talked about him, you know, uniting the gangs, because at the end of the day, he saw as a person from the street or exposed to the streets that gangs had those purposes. So to try to coalesce all of that was an important goal of his that some people didn't want him to do.
Got it, crazy. Man. And I just want to say this last study I've been working on as of late, man. As we know, in this country, the police tend to kill a lot of citizens. I think in the last 2 years, I think well over 1,000 citizens have been killed on average over the last 2 years. So, and what we realize, 90% of these killings are like justified homicides. Many of the officers put on paid administrative leave and then later, you know, just kind of dismiss. Like, man, they. So what I decided to do, I wanted to see how many children and teenagers have been killed by these police within these numbers. And what I came to find out is something close to like 114, 16 from January 2016 up until August 2017. Children, teenagers, 0 to 19 years old, all races, black, white, Latino, hundreds. And so what I wanted, so my present study, what I want to do, man, I want to reach out to the family and loved ones of all these children and teen victims to really understand the impact of the loss of this child and teenager on their daily lives, man. And I want to record their stories, just like y'all brothers doing this.
Yeah,
I
man.
want to get their stories and make sure I get it on record for the world to know.
I can already tell you that we're gonna have to have you back for part 2 because it's
That's
amazing
the
how
whole
fast the half hour goes. We got like 5 minutes, man. So what you gotta ask him, Garvey?
So first of all, again, Dr. Rowe, that's gonna be your hip hop name, hip hop abbreviation for the day, Dr. Rowe.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing so much of your story and how your story influences your present and how your present work is designed to shape the future.
It's real, man.
One thing that we want to tap into right now, and this will expose a lot about like your values that you just communicated. You already started a little bit, but we always ask, what is your top 5? Right?
You'll see.
Yes. And now I can take a guess based off of
Yeah,
the
I
work
think
that
you
you're doing
probably know
around,
some of
youth violence and police brutality and, uplifting our folk. But we like to hear it and perhaps debate it a little bit if we got some time.
I'm gonna be quick just so we can have some time. Number
Yeah.
1, Tupac Shakur. I finished.
one.
Yep, number one. Revolutionary culture. Number 2 and 3. I'm going to say Stickman and M1.
Right on.
Dead
Okay.
Prez. Number 4, I gotta say Nas.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta say Nas. And then I think my number 5. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put Big up there.
Word.
Yeah.
Okay.
You rattled them off pretty quick. I'm impressed.
You did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wait, so you said Pac, M1, Stickman,
Nah.
Nas.
Nas,
B.I.G.
B.I.G.
Yep. That's my 5. And I
Is there an order of Stickman and M1? I've never asked that question.
Right.
Like people always kind of just lump them, but like, you think one of them is nicer?
I can't say one is nicer, because I listen to them closely and I realize sometimes one is better than the other and vice versa, depending on how heavy and how much I'm influenced by the lyrics. But I think I would have to say M1. I would probably say M1. And I think M1, he has done just a creative and phenomenal job promoting revolutionary culture and hip hop. And so when we think about just all the revolutionaries who have influenced Black history in America and then even beyond, I think he does a very creative, he has a very creative approach in using all that information and putting it in his music.
Yeah.
And as you said early, on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
He's always reminding us of those heroes. And I think, and a Stickman do it too, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I think if I had to say one of the two, it would be M1. Yeah.
Word.
What about you?
Pac is overrated. I said that to be just to play
Okay.
devil's advocate.
Okay.
I used to think that though. I did used to think Pac was overrated, but then I really, it's one of those things where, when people, glorify something so big, you start to get skeptical about it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where, Pac was immediately dubbed like one of the greatest to ever do it. And then through my underground backpack era, I'm like, man, there's dudes that are more lyrical than this, It doesn't.
Yeah.
But then, hip hop's way more than lyrics.
Yeah.
It's about soul. It's about what you're doing
It's
with your
about
music.
history, too.
You know what I'm saying? It's about
Yeah.
history. It's about iconography. And Pac was undoubtedly one of the best to do it. And one of my favorite just people in history, period, let alone on the mic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
I'll just so briefly say, and he was a Renaissance man. He was active in so many different mediums, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
His creativity didn't know any bounds, and he was an interrupter in all
That's
of those
right.
spaces as a musician, as an actor, and he was evolving too.
That's
you know,
right.
he was
Right.
he was in
he
a
was
space-
maturing too. man.
He was. So yeah, he was
That's right. Ain't too many
one of a kind, man.
Right.
Straight up.
Ain't too many rappers on the COINTELPRO list. You know what I'm saying?
And that's
He was
something
there.
I think, and I'll say this brief, why I would put Tupac number 1 is because of his historical influence and his background.
That's right.
So he was one of the rappers at the time who was keeping the Black Power movement alive. And he wasn't only doing it through his lyrics, but also through his practice by trying to unify gangs
right.
from across the
Indeed.
country.
Word up.
So he was doing more than just spitting it on the mic, but he was also doing it in practice in the streets.
That's right. Well, Dr. Outland, man, we gotta have you back.
Oh, man, I
you know what I'm
can't
saying?
wait.
We
I'm
need
looking forward
we
to
need to
it.
get through a quarter of what
Right.
we want to actually,
Yeah.
get in
I wish
there
there
with
was
you
more
for
time,
sure,
man.
for sure, man. But thank you for joining us. we look forward to having you again, bro.
Okay,
You know what
thank
I'm
you,
saying?
brother.
Thank you for all the listeners. Shout outs to Wayo FM 104.3. Catch us on Wayo on Tuesdays, 1:30 to 2.
You got it right.
We're getting the times right. You know what I'm
Alright.
saying? Thank you for all the listeners, all the viewers. You can catch it on the tube.
Yes.
Peace and progress.
Peace,
All
y'all.
right, one love. That's what it is.